This narrative recounts a Cold War catastrophe that unfolded on April 15, 1969. It was a day characterized by the consequences of a critical lapse in the US intelligence community as they misinterpreted North Korean strategic military maneuvers and failed to convey essential intelligence to the crew of Deep Sea 129. The subsequent events sent profound shockwaves through the Cold War narrative, leaving an indelible imprint as a momentous historical incident. In the early morning hours at Atsugi Naval Air Station, Japan, preparations were underway for a standard reconnaissance mission with the US Navy Lockheed EC-121M, call-signed Deep Sea 129. Naval Air Station Atsugi, a key US asset during the Cold War, was crucial for naval and aerial operations in the Pacific, especially significant for its proximity to the Korean Peninsula and East Asia, regions rife with Cold War tensions. The base played an instrumental role in intelligence gathering on communist threats, thereby aiding the US strategy to maintain a power balance and counter communist expansion. As Deep Sea 129 was readied for its mission, the Lockheed EC-121 Warning Star, a military version of the Lockheed Super Constellation, stood as a testament to American ingenuity in airborne surveillance. Since 1954, this aircraft had been a cornerstone in monitoring Soviet bomber activities and also crucial during the Vietnam War in tracking North Vietnamese supply routes. Outfitted with innovative radar and electronic countermeasures, it was a pivotal asset in the US's intelligence efforts. Fleet Air Reconnaissance Squadron 1, based at Naval Air Station Atsugi, was tasked with operating the EC-121 aircraft in reconnaissance missions. Operating under the Peacetime Aerial Reconnaissance Program, their objective was to gather intelligence in standoff missions against nations like North Korea, often skirting the borders of hostile territories. These operations were critical for gathering vital intelligence, but came with inherent risks due to their proximity to potentially hostile regions. At 7 a.m. on April 15, 1969, Deep Sea 129 departed from Naval Air Station Atsugi, Japan. Its mission, codenamed Beggar Shadow, was part of a late 1960s Cold War reconnaissance program by the US Navy. This program involved gathering intelligence on Soviet bloc communications, while adhering to international laws by operating in international waters. For Deep Sea 129, this specific mission entailed a standard signal intelligence collection task under the Beggar Shadow program. The flight from Naval Air Station Atsugi was meticulously mapped out. With Lieutenant Commander Overstreet at the controls, the crew charted a northern course until it reached Japan's coastline. They then turned northwest, flying over the Sea of Japan towards a designated area known as Musu Point. Here, the crew were to embark on a 120 nautical mile elliptical flight pattern for 2.5 hours, parallel to North Korea's east coast. The crew were instructed to keep the flight at least 50 nautical miles away from the North Korean coastline. A total flight duration of 8.5 hours was calculated for this operation, with an ultimate scheduled landing at Osan Air Base in South Korea, which would mark the conclusion of Deep Sea 129's mission. This route, flown by the Fleet Air Reconnaissance Squadron for 2 years, was considered to have minimal risk, with nearly 200 similar missions completed in the early part of 1969 without incident. Several hours into their flight over the Sea of Japan, the crew of Deep Sea 129 diligently executed their operational roles. The team comprised 9 officers and 22 enlisted men. Among them were 9 Naval Security Group members, including 1 Marine, some of whom were cryptologic technicians and linguists skilled in Russian and Korean. Their expertise in languages and cryptography was vital to the mission's core objective of intelligence gathering. As the crew were deeply immersed in their tasks, Their routine mission was on the brink of evolving into a catastrophe that was set to send shockwaves of disbelief across the Cold War landscape. In the days leading up to April 15th, a significant development occurred unbeknownst to the crew of Deep Sea 129. On March 28th, North Korea made a strategic military maneuver, redeploying two MiG-21 fishbed fighters from Pukchang-ni to Homun airfield on the east coast. This unprecedented move, the first time MiG-21s were stationed at Homun, was picked up by US intelligence sources. However, this vital piece of information, which suggested a possible escalation in North Korean military readiness, was not relayed to the crew. The US intelligence community, interpreting the deployment as part of routine training exercises, failed to grasp the gravity of this redeployment. As Deep Sea 129 was navigating the skies on its assigned mission, approximately 6.5 hours into the flight, the unthinkable happened. US signal intelligence assets detected the launch of two MiG-21s. These were the same two North Korean MiGs that had been sent to Homun 18 days prior. It became evident that the MiGs were on a trajectory to intercept Deep Sea 129. Despite US intelligence issuing warnings to the crew, no responses were received. Observations noted that one of the MiGs took up a defensive patrol orbit, maintaining a distance of no less than 65 nautical miles from the target, while the other pursued a direct approach, closing in rapidly. As monitored by US intelligence, radar data showed the tracks of Deep Sea 129 and the attacking MiG-21 beginning to merge. The North Korean MiG-21 secured a missile lock on Deep Sea 129 and launched an AA-2 infrared-guided air-to-air missile. Within seconds, the missile impacted its defenseless target, detonating and inflicting severe structural damage to the EC-121. Despite the crew's best efforts, Deep Sea 129 soon entered an uncontrolled descent into the ocean, culminating in a heartbreaking tragedy with no survivors.
The Department of Defense issued the following statement at 4:58 a.m. this morning. The North Koreans have claimed that they have intercepted and shot down a U.S. military aircraft. We can report the following. Aerial search operations are underway.
The news of the shootdown reached Washington with alarming speed, sending shockwaves through the corridors of power. President Nixon and his advisors were immediately faced with a critical decision: how to respond to this blatant act of aggression without igniting a full-scale military conflict. The stakes were high, and the world watched with bated breath as the United States deliberated its next move. Meanwhile, an extensive search and rescue operation was launched in the Sea of Japan. US Navy and Air Force units, along with South Korean forces, combed the area in a desperate search for survivors. The vast expanse of the sea, however, offered no hope, no sign of the crew. It was a grim realization. All 31 members of Deep Sea 129 had sadly perished in the icy waters. On April 16th, the National Security Council was divided over whether to take aggressive military action or pursue a cautious diplomatic approach in response to the crisis. President Nixon and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger were inclined toward a more aggressive stance. However, with the Vietnam War's popularity waning and political support diminishing, Nixon was wary of entering another conflict. Some media speculated the incident might have been accidental, without definitive proof of it being deliberate. Despite the tragedy, it's highlighted that in 1969, the US was experiencing significant casualties in Vietnam, with over 500 servicemen lost monthly. Post-incident, North Korean military actions appeared defensive, with no evidence of an impending offensive. The proximity of Seoul to North Korean military capabilities underscored the potential for catastrophic civilian casualties and a bloody conflict if war broke out on the Korean peninsula. After considerable debate, Nixon decided to deploy Task Force 7-1 to the Sea of Japan as a significant demonstration of military power and to quickly resume intelligence flights near North Korea, signaling that the US would not succumb to intimidation. On April 18th, Nixon spoke to the American public, sharing intelligence details that the National Security Agency had preferred he kept confidential. He assured that North Korea would not be able to repeat its actions without consequences. Internationally, the incident had far-reaching implications. It strained the already tenuous US-North Korean relations and placed the two nations on the brink of a larger military confrontation. Calls for retaliation were strong, but the US government, under President Nixon's leadership, ultimately chose a measured response. This decision, while controversial, was a reflection of the complex nature of Cold War diplomacy, where actions and reactions had to be carefully weighed to avoid escalating tensions into an outright war. As the world reflects on the legacy of the EC-121 Deep Sea-129 shootdown, its significance in the tapestry of Cold War history is undeniable. It highlights the perilous nature of intelligence gathering in an era marked by global tension and the extraordinary bravery of those who undertake such high-risk missions. Closing this chapter of history, we pay tribute to the crew of Deep Sea-129, whose mission ended in tragedy, but whose legacy endures. Their story is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the unending quest for peace in a complex and often turbulent world.
I thought about what it would be like to be back in the cockpit with Jim as his co-pilot. Little did I realize right then the significance of those fleeting thoughts.